I would like have this almost howling like rah, and it was really empowering, and I felt really strong. I felt like I can do this, and I could feel at that point like my baby's head like bearing down. I had this urge to like really like shout and voice with a lot of the contractions. Then suddenly with one of them, without like thinking, I blubbered my lips, and it was almost comical because I would be like rah with the others, and then suddenly I'm like it was kind of this relief.
I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, Güte, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you today?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here. Thanks.
So lovely to have you. I can't wait to hear your birth story. You've been a part of my village for quite some time, and but I always love to hear like in depth every detail. So I can't wait to hear yours. Yeah.
Oh, it's hard to actually start somewhere because I feel like the whole it's almost like it's a kind of a moment in my life, in my whole life, and that my whole life is kind of part of it, and certainly um you know it does. I feel like the birth story doesn't start with like the first contractions, really. It's like the pregnancy leading up to it and before that, and as we know, even ancestrally it all influences us. And I know we talked a bit about in South Africa, where I'm from and where I'm currently based. It's very medicalized birthing, and but I always knew I would want to have at least a vaginal birth, maybe in a hospital, or I wasn't actually so knowledgeable about birthing, and but I had a few people along the way, some pregnant friends who also birthed naturally, who inspired me, and I always felt like that just intuitively felt really good to keep it as natural. And also, as with other areas in my life, it's not as if this is something suddenly in isolation. It's still, a very part of who of course, it's a very big part and thing in my life, but it will, they say you birth how you are. So, and it would have made sense for me to have a natural birth, and what natural actually meant. I didn't even, think that far necessarily. But I was inspired by yeah, as I said, some people, and close to my pregnancy. So a dear friend, Nix, who's also did your sacred birthing course. She had her baby just after I got pregnant, and her story was just so beautiful. And she told me about this podcast as well, and I was extremely inspired. And and also another good friend of mine had a VBAC, so a HVAC, home birth after her cesarean, and I felt so inspired by that. I was kind of like open at the beginning, and then it became clear that if I'm too open, I might be like just hijacked by someone's agenda, and that it's very important to lead this, and from an intuitive space as well, rather than just like an intellectualizing um, exercise. And so yeah, I think only I was at the end of my first trimester when my friend had a beautiful water birth at home, and because we're very close, she's like a sister, I was very part of that birthing process, and I felt like I almost had like a postpartum doula role, and it was one of the most beautiful things I could ever, experience. And it really inspired me to also, go all natural. And my pregnancy was just so joyful. And I think also it's kind of beautiful how the seasons of my pregnancy also kind of, I felt like it matched the cycle of my pregnancy as well. Like we were living in London at the time, and where she was born, my baby, and we conceived around spring, and then there was like this the second trimester was like summer, and I did so much. I went to like quite a few like natural festivals and things like that, and I was actually quite active, and I was almost more active than you know not when I wasn't pregnant, and in terms of like camping and things like that. And I think that actually set a bit of a tone for my actual birth as well. And yeah, and then her due date was so before that, of course, the nesting phase was like, it kicked in, and I was really like I got extremely nerdy about like birthing, but by then I'd like really become so passionate. And I think I joined your village like literally the I think the weekend before I had Elsie. Like I joined because I heard about it through Nick's, and I decided, I think postpartum and in my first year of being a mama, I think this will be a beautiful place to nurture me, and especially because of the kind of the culture that it also sets, like kind of the tendency to just to be intuitive. And I wanted to carry that through into my motherhood as well. So in terms of the actual labor, well, I mean, I suppose, as I say, I can, there's so much I can say about, how I prepared, and I was wondering if I should have how close should my parents be with me, because I'm very close to my parents, but they, like all my daughters, nieces and nephews, my siblings as kids, they were completely planned cesareans. They, didn't even, would never consider a home birth. It would be, something that would be so foreign for them. And some of them are medically trained, or they're, surgeons. And so it was, yeah, I felt like I would have a lot more like pushback in general, just not from them, but in general. But I feel like because of people that have supported me, I kind of felt like my voice became strong enough, and I felt I was quite informed, especially by listening to things like your podcast and joining groups, and being surrounded by women who got it. I felt like I enrolled people around me as well, which is so beautiful. So I feel like so over the months of pregnancy, I felt like I coached my parents as well, and my mum, I think she was very inspired because she had, well, not completely natural births, but she was very passionate about her like vaginal births at least, and the fact that it was relatively natural, and that she felt it was like the best days of her life. And that's already an incredible like starting point for me to feel that my mum felt that about my birth. And so yeah, so I decided, okay, I would definitely want my mother close by, postpartum, but the actual birth. And that's always the thing. You don't know how you're going to feel. How you can kind of gauge, or and maybe if you've done it once before, you wouldn't kind of have an idea. But even then, I suppose every birth is also unique. And so we planned that they would come a little bit beforehand, before the baby, like as we didn't know when she would come specifically, but we planned that they could be there, that we can have some time for them to be with me as I'm very pregnant, because they came all the way from South Africa. And then the closer we got to that time, I was like, oh, what was I thinking? Or not really. I was kind of like, and my husband, who is also very enrolled and very realized that this home birth situation is actually great. He felt like, I think he also likes to be in control to an extent. So I think he found it actually quite, yeah, quite amazing that, and also me speaking about it, he realized that he actually doesn't want to go into the hospital. He's not a fan of hospitals. So it's wonderful that he was like, by my side. And and was also intrigued by a lot of the things that I learned along the way. And yeah, so my parents arrived, and that in the moment they arrived, I had my first contractions. So it was so interesting because um I was literally, I had took the keys to go and fetch them from like like they came with the underground from the airport. So they were like just it's like a 3-minute drive. And so I just went to collect them with suitcases, and it was in the morning of a Monday morning, and it was like basically 5 days before my due date. I was due the Friday, and well, due. And so that was quite interesting to have, yeah, to like feel, okay, whoa, this is now I know how it feels like to have a contraction. And the first one, and they were quite strong, but also I didn't really know if how strong they were. I couldn't compare it to anything else. So I thought, okay, this might still take days, I'm open for it to like it can, subside, and I have no idea how long it's gonna last. And then I collected them, and I was really like walking slowly to like I got out of the car, and as I walked to the car again, I was like, whew. And I knew the thing about like not necessarily calling the doula and the midwife super in advance. I mean, I did tell them, but I wasn't like, okay, I need to go, the baby's coming, kind of. I was quite chilled about it. But I did find myself feeling really inward, and I'm a quite extroverted person, and I'm so happy to see my parents. And I think that's possibly the oxytocin from seeing them probably helped my surges. And throughout the day, so they came to, they settled in, and my husband was like, okay, what do we do? So our plan was that they would go to my sister and be with my, so luckily they were very happy for us to to have my parents over, because they were also very excited to see them and haven't seen them in a while. And but yeah, I mean, we didn't anticipate that it would be so quick. And I told my husband, let's just wait, let's just see how this evening goes, like how the night goes, and then so that they can at least have one night after their international flight. And because my sister's like they're about a 2-hour train journey from us. But yeah, so the day went on. We had a nice long walk. This was the 2nd of December, so it was proper winter. And I'm so happy because the sun was shining. It was one of the few days that the sun was shining in London, and I really capitalized on that to just have a stroll and be outside, fresh air, be in the park, and proper waddling. Um, and it was quite interesting because so the surges kind of died down a little bit. I was quite tired because I hadn't slept as much the 2 nights before, and then it was cool. I attended an online like intuitive visioning session that so it's a session that happens once a month at the beginning of the month, and it's really beautiful because it's a nice practice to just kind of have a visioning for the month to come. And during that, the surgery started again. It was like 5 p.m. in the evening. And it was quite funny because I told the people on the call, okay, I'm kind of in early stages of labor, and they were like, what's going on? And I'm actually so happy that I did that because it's so nice that I had a time to, to kind of journal and be with that, because I don't know if I would have done that if I didn't like plan to attend the session. And then after that we had dinner with my parents, and I could feel all the more like as if I really wanted to be inward, and I was kind of quite overwhelmed, and it was literally just my husband and my parents and me, and I felt quite overwhelmed. And looking back, I know now also a bit better that was probably showing that I was quite, further on than I thought I would be, that I thought I was. And I went to bed with a TENS machine on my back. I thought, okay, I'll have that. But it was quite annoying, I have to say. I didn't I think it was something to kind of be with. And 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 I sleep in quite a dark room, so I was kind of like struggling to like push the button every time I had a contraction. So I had I didn't have like an amazing night of sleep, but at least I, kind of drifted away, and then the contractions felt like they were really becoming stronger. And then about 2 a.m. I woke up to go to the toilet, and then I saw the mucus plug come out, and I was pretty sure that's because it was quite mucusy, and I thought, okay, that's probably it. And that's when I messaged my doula and the midwife, because in London it's, as with probably most of the UK, it's really lovely that, if you do want to have a home birth, and you might know this, that, the midwife would come to your home and you have your appointments at home. And that was really special because, during my, throughout my pregnancy, most of it, at the beginning, I didn't necessarily subscribe to that. I just went to a hospital, had one of my first few kind of appointments I had there, and then when I decided, okay, I definitely want a home birth, I had to move to a different hospital, and I'm actually glad I did, because this specific home birth team has become kind of famous around the like natural birthing community, because they are just really, really into home birthing and natural birthing. It made me feel very safe, because I felt like they would by no means, like, I really felt with the midwife that I had, that they would not want to like just get me to a hospital if anything happens. We spent a lot of time talking about, possible scenarios, or she talked to me about like how about her experiences, and it became very clear to me that having anything that would be called an emergency is generally spotted or felt way in advance, way before you need to really, really worry about it. Things like transfers are, basically almost never happen in an emergency situation. And Nix told me that, at the very beginning, Nix told me that your words about, and that made me feel very safe. She told me that Anna said in her, many years of midwifery, that, that there weren't really emergency transfers. It's like it's not something that happens all the time. So that gave me a lot of comfort. I think that is often most people's worry, because, you think, that you're putting yourself in danger. But I
Yeah.
mean, quite the opposite, I would say.
Beautiful. Yeah, for
Yeah.
anyone listening, Nix is one of my sacred birth worker now graduates. And obviously during that time when she said that, she was one of my students. And yeah, that's the truth. It's very safe to birth at home. And most transfers that goes from home to hospital is because of maternal fatigue. So women actually saying, I want to go in because I'm so tired, or I want pain relief. Very, very few transfers are due to any emergency. And usually, if they are, it's because the midwife caught it way, way early and transferred in a non-emergent state. The actual percentage of actual like super emergency, I have no idea. It's so minuscule. It's just almost non-existent. It's really true. It is very safe to birth at home. Mm.
Yeah, as I would argue that it's much, personally, I think it is actually much more safe than going to the hospital, if you really want to compare. And she gave me a scenario, like a case where they did advise the woman to go to the hospital, and she didn't want to, because she had meconium in her water, so like a baby fetal poo basically in the waters, and she was advised to, because it was very, very dark, very, very, very dark, and she didn't want to. And and this is how wonderful this team is. And I mean, this is not something that they would always have resources to, but they got the whole home birthing team to come to the home. So 5 of them came to the home, because they knew that this might be a risk, and then they actually resuscitated the baby, because there was meconium, and then they did actually transfer after the birth. They transferred to the hospital, but that was a classic case of like, trusting that, that you, yeah, that I could maybe trust the midwives to know that there's something that will happen. And then they kind of, set up the situation that she would be safe. So anyway, and that's nothing like that happened to me. So I remember like when I lost my mucus plug, I thought, because the blood was quite dark, and I was like, is that meconium? I was thinking, I was just thinking, I was kind of had this almost fear of meconium and thinking, is it that, and but yeah, they just said it's a good bloody show, that in their words. And so I messaged both my doula and my midwife, and that was, as I said, like 2 a.m. and my husband woke with me, and we were like, okay, I think we need to book train tickets for my parents so that so that they can, gently leave, because as happy as they were with me having the whole situation, I wouldn't necessarily want them in the home. It was getting a bit crowded with, with like my husband, the doula, and then the midwife, and then they always, so I had a midwife that was my midwife that was with me throughout the most of the pregnancy, but then they would always send another midwife, so they would generally have two midwives attending a birth. So it's already quite a few people, and yeah, and they, it's not, they didn't necessarily always speak the language, so it was quite sweet because I was quickly going into labor, and my parents woke up quite early, and my husband started blowing up the pool and filling the pool a little bit, and I was telling him, I think really it feels like it's could be close, and I was like, I wanted to say goodbye to them, but I was like in our bedroom on all fours, and they came in and they were looking for it. It was quite dark, and they were like looking for me, and they saw me like on all fours, and they came to me. And they were like, "Is it sore? Is it sore?" And I was kind of like, oh, I was thinking to myself, at least I know that, they kind of like, oh, you're UK kind of thing, but so sweet and so lovely, and at least I knew, as I said, I knew that they, you know like I would like when I was like in kind of having these moments, my husband would be like, you're a strong mama. He was just like, I was so happy that he knew kind of like that, to encourage rather than be like, oh, are you, like, are you suffering kind of thing. And so it was luckily at that time when they came, I was fine with it. It was, but I didn't want that kind of energy like all through, of course. And it was quite special because my father put his hand on my, because they were like, they wanted to like kind of touch me and just kind of be like feel me, and I was like, no, I really, at that moment I was like, I can't, and they were, and my dad just like lightly put his hand on my head and he said a little prayer, and I found that really beautiful. I found that was really, yeah, that was quite yeah, just a lovely moment, and then they parted, and afterwards my mum said she felt very safe, and she's so happy that she could feel that. She was really, because initially she's can be quite anxious, quite an anxious person, and initially she, in my pregnancy she was a bit like, and but by then she was, yeah, she felt really safe, and that's just really beautiful for me, that was all. It's not just about my experience, it's also my family and my mum, and how it's something like that can inspire them as well. And so they left, and then my doula came, and I feel like that at that moment, I feel like I had a transition into the down stage. So like, I feel like when she came, I had a transition, but I didn't necessarily know it fully. And I remember, so she arrived, and it was like around 7 in the morning, and Theo, my husband, asked me like, he made himself a little decaf coffee, and I was like, I think I'm gonna have a decaf. I think, it's just like just being real with the day, and I was like, okay, this is comforting, and then my doula arrives, and I'm like drinking this, and in her mind, I think she felt like I still had a long way to go, because I was kind of like, I think I was quite alert, and maybe because I had, was in a transition stage, because I was maybe more, um, had maybe a bit of an adrenaline spike. I was a bit more like with it, and and I think it's interesting because I feel like in some ways that was, I wouldn't say a bad thing, but that was maybe not as fortunate as I, because then, so the thing is um wanted my midwife to come then, because I was like, she has so much experience with birthing the baby, well, being there with baby, birthing the baby, and I, yeah, my husband or Agustina, they have none of them have like really, not that I necessarily wanted them to like catch the baby, but they hadn't experienced doing that. So I wondered if, so in my to my mind, I was like, I don't know how to like, I didn't have like training, or I didn't know like really exactly how to do it by myself or with necessarily with them. And I just I think the thing is I really felt safe with my midwife. I really we created we've like fostered a really beautiful relationship, and she's also very hands off, but she was almost like a safe person that I felt like I wanted to have there, because I think she's someone that I spent the most time with in terms of like actual technical things around my pregnancy, so to speak. So um, I messaged her and said, please, can you come? And then she phoned my husband, and they were at the pool downstairs, and she's like, should I come now? Is Güte, does she need me, or do you think, we need more, there's more time? And then the doula told her, no, I think she's fine. I don't, you don't have to come. So that was interesting, because then I felt, okay, I feel like I need to like have this baby now, whatever that is going to look like. But I was like, I really feel like I need her there. And I think I was actually quite far along. So we did some things to like try and ease my discomfort. So like I asked her to do like a rebozo technique with me, like kind of with a cloth, like kind of holding my belly, because it was I felt it was so heavy, bearing down on all fours. And so I think, in retrospect, she told me she thought I was like far, not as far along, because that's not something you would do like so close to the end. But I mean, I was just like, I just want some sort of like relief or support or something. And then I was like, I really want to go into the pool now. I feel like the comfort of the warm water would be incredible. And she wanted to like hold it off a bit, because she was like, the classic thing of like not going into the pool too soon, um because it might, like, the kind of the thing of being with other kind of, I don't know, tools first, so that you have the pool as like a final thing to like kind of relieve you. There's this idea that, like being with things like the tens machine, or moving, or birth balls or something, and then kind of waiting till closer to the end for the pool. That's what some people feel. And I think now, if I would have this experience again, I would probably, I can always go into the pool and then out of it again. So
Um,
so yeah.
I think this is really important information
Mm.
because I mean, a lot of people listening to this podcast are also birth workers, and it's really important to hear this, that,
Yeah.
and something that I'm very clear on with teaching my sacred birth workers is to let the woman lead and to walk alongside a woman and trust the woman's instincts. And if a woman wants to jump in the pool or whatever, like, who are you to say no? I think, yes, we know that that can slow things down if it's early, but also if it does, then maybe that was meant to be. Maybe the woman just needed that pause. Who are we to say that? I think it's really important as birth workers, whether we are a doula, sacred birth workers, midwives, obstetricians, whoever, that we stop thinking that we're the expert and that we are going to guide women in birth, but allow women to guide us as birth workers, but we are needed in the space to do for them, be of service for them. I hear this a lot, so I think this is a really good kind of pause to really acknowledge that women are the expert, not the midwives, not the any birth worker. First and foremost, it's you as the birthing mother.
Thank you for saying that. I think yeah, I really appreciate that. Um, yeah, yeah, thank you so much, because I think that's just, even for myself, if I have this experience again, to be stronger in my intuition in that. And I remember, when I was pregnant and still looking for a doula, I spoke to a doula that I really admire, and I wanted her to be a doula for me, and but she lived a bit far, and she told me, don't put the doula on a pedestal, and that stayed with me, and it was such an amazing phrase, because it's ironic that you want to like avoid a medicalized birth, but then you just put someone else in power and not yourself. So it could be the same or even worse, maybe whatever, to follow a specific person rather than your own intuition and your own gut and feeling. So yeah, I think that is definitely something to, yeah, it's a sound principle to, as you say, let the mama lead. And so what we did then at that moment is she said she would advise rather to go to the shower or the bath. So that's what we did. And it was so uncomfortable. It was so, the shower and the bath was so uncomfortable, because the bath is not, to like, as being fully pregnant and like holding on the side of like this hard thing was like so, oh, it was, but the water completely calmed me down. Like the shower was really relieving. So like the warm water on my whole body is so lovely. And and they left me alone for a little bit at that time, which is fine. I was kind of like going in a zone, but I was so extremely tired. I actually, like, I was sitting in the bath, but like you can't, like, being pregnant and sitting in the bath is not so easy. Because I didn't want to like lie down on my back. Like I'd also I know, yeah, I know it's fine, but I mean, I heard stories also like that the baby can sometimes turn if you lie on your back in that at that time. But I think it was more, it wasn't that so much. It was more that I felt like I wanted to be more upright. And I remember like leaning like the kind of to the side, and with my legs kind of just in a sitting position, and almost like kind of almost falling asleep in the bath. And then as it got so uncomfortable, and then kind of waking up again and like kind of sitting to the other side. And and it's interesting because this stayed with me postpartum, that moment, and I felt like it was such a hard moment, but it's almost like it I felt like it made me a little bit stronger, that kind of little bit of suffering. And not that, yeah, it was just an interesting like moment where I was like, because I was really calmed down by the water, but I was still like feeling intensity. And um another thing that was interesting is I was shaking a lot during the labor, and I found it quite beautiful because I felt like it was an adrenaline release. And I remember like a friend of mine telling the story about um she had she had a dentist appointment, like something done with her teeth, and the anesthetic didn't work really well, and then she shook because of the pain, and they wanted to like give her like something to make her calmer, like some sort of injection or something to stop shaking. And she was like, no, 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 but this is my body's natural way of like being with it, and processing the adrenaline. And I found that so cool. She's a breath worker, and or she does breath work, and she's a practitioner. And I found that it was so comforting, that thought of like also just having listened to wise women or like learned from people along my journey on in life, to remember that this is the way. In some ways I'm using energy, but it's also kind of like I was just being with it. I was like freaked out by the shaking. So yeah, and I was calmed down by the water, and then I just really wanted to also lie down. And I was like, I think I want to be more comfortable now. And I went to a room that we have in onto a bed. And and then I was like, where is Sarah? Where's my midwife? I was like, okay, I really feel like I need her now. And I was like, and I started then, I almost felt like I started raging a bit, which is felt really empowering. And I was like on all fours on my bed. But I was okay. It was a very interesting kind of process, because it was almost like knowing that I actually don't need her. I essentially don't need her. But like in my mind, that this was something that, that I kind of planned or wanted to be with. So it is an interesting thing that it happened that this way. and I was on all fours, and a very good friend of mine had sent me a voice note of an oracle card that she read about um uh um the the wild feminine, and about my inner wolf. And I put it in my birth playlist, and we put her voice on, and it was so empowering. It was so beautiful. And I remember with every surge, I was like, I would like have this almost howling like rah, and it was really empowering. And I felt really strong. I felt like I can do this. And it was really beautiful, and it was like really like a sacred, almost magical moment in that time there. And then something so interesting happened, and I didn't kind of see it, but I just kind of imagined, because I was on all fours. And then what happened is my water sac like came out of me, and it burst open, and it whoosh. And I like kind of intuitively, before, actually just before it happened, I wanted my lovely long pregnancy pillow. I wanted it kind of underneath my bum, as I kind of was kind of like moving on all fours. And then the water broke onto it, like the sack. And both my husband and, I don't know if the doula also thought, but it was almost felt like it was my baby being born. It was, for a split second, I also thought, is it, is she coming out there, and but it was kind of this proper gush, like in the movies, right? Like a proper water flow. And then there was like still a piece of like of the sack dangling. And I was like, okay, now I think I can go to the water now. Let's go. And my husband said Sarah is going to be in 15 minutes. I was like, okay, I think I might be able to hold on 15 minutes. I could feel at that point like that my baby's head like bearing down. And and we went down, and it was so lovely. Like, it's like the kitchen and the living room areas like one piece. And it was around 11 a.m. in the morning, and they had put some like tea lights, and there was my like birth playlist, very calm music. And I got into the water, and it was just wonderful. And it's like the tone kind of just completely changed, to an extent, because I just felt more, it was just more like held, and kind of, it was lovely, because the kind of morning light trickled in through the blinds, and we never really put those blinds down, so it was kind of like a nice ambiance. And then my midwife arrives, and I'm like so happy that she's there. And and she and then yeah, we I was in the water, and she was, she felt, I felt really comforted by her, and I felt very like it was just like being with every surge. And there was a beautiful moment where I, like, as I said before, like I had this urge to like really shout and voice with a lot of the contractions. But then suddenly with one of them, without like thinking, I blubbered my lips and went close to the end. And I found it was almost comical, because I would be like rah with the others, and then suddenly I'm like, and it was kind of this relief. And um and and and, and I felt like quite close to like some of the women that have also been with me through this journey. And it was quite like a spiritual moment. I felt like very connected to a lot of the mamas that have birthed before me. And and a wonderful friend and mother of mine, who's also a pregnancy yoga teacher. She would always, in the classes, do the lips blubber. And they say, a floppy mouth, floppy fanny. So that blubbering is so good for just relaxing and releasing.
Yeah,
And it's quite nice that I just had that moment.
beautiful. And for anyone who's not watching the YouTube, you're doing horse lips, because it might not be picked up on the on the podcast. So she's doing these very loose horse lips, which does really relax everything down below as well. Beautiful.
Yeah, blowing raspberries. So that vibration is just like was so calming. And then like 5 minutes, like I had my baby half an hour after the midwife arrived. But like 5 minutes before my birth, another midwife came. So I was like, oh, hello, like another person. But I really trusted this home birth team, which is great, because I'd known about her, hadn't met her, but she was so lovely, and they were they stood behind me in the water. So I was on all fours, kind of holding with one hand to the side, and they had a mirror, and they so they didn't touch me, and so they could see Elsie's, Elsie's face, and then I could feel her head coming through, and they kind of like guided me in a way that they gave me, like, they, kind of, they would say, oh, the head is here and you can just keep on going as you are, and yeah, and then her body came out and they said, you can catch your baby now, and she came swimming up, and I was like, this is so cool that I get to touch her very first time, and I, yeah, took her up in my arms, and it was, yeah, it was so precious, and my husband had a few tears, and yeah, I asked them, do you think I can start breastfeeding? They were like, go for it. And I put her on my breast, and yeah, and then it was quite, yeah, it was really beautiful. It was quite like, I hadn't, like, everything hadn't synced in yet, but baby was quite calm. She was just like, she didn't really cry at that moment. And and I just kind of knew that I'd also heard that it's better to birth a placenta. If I want to keep my placenta, it's supposedly better to do it outside of the water. So I just thought, okay, I'll get out of the water. And at some point, I was sitting on the couch, and I was like kind of reclining, and I thought to myself, this is probably not the best position for the placenta to come out. Like, I was thinking like a more like a like a squatting or something position. And it's interesting that in the UK, with the home birth, they give you, or this hospital, I'm not sure if all hospitals do it, probably they give you like a birth box a few days, like 2 weeks or so before your due date, and that's for the midwife to, that's like things that the midwife will use, and there's like a cart, like this bowl made of paper mache, and that can be used for multiple things, maybe if you're a bit nauseous, and she was saying it's really great, it fits really nicely into a toilet, and it's really great for placenta birth. So I was like, okay, I think I'll do that. So I was like, I went to the toilet, and placenta came out really easily because of that position, and yeah, and it was great, and I was carrying, having, like, Elsie was on me all that time, and then afterwards, after that, the midwives told me that I had quite a lot of bleeding, and this is an interesting one for me, because I still, this is something I'm still kind of like wondering about, and I don't know if I mentioned it in the community, it's in the village, but it's something I'm still like kind of wondering about, because supposedly a lot of that's like, it could be very dangerous if a woman loses a lot of blood, or, I mean, essentially, if anyone loses a lot of blood, of course it's not great, but I always wonder if it's not something that will equalize. So they were just saying it would be a pity if I, like, some people can really, like, almost pass out, and then it would be a pity if they would need to transfer me now afterwards. Um, and so we did some witchy things first. So I put a piece of placenta in my cheek, because I think supposedly, maybe you would know better, but supposedly that helps with the release of oxytocin, which further, like, contracts the uterus, so that the blood and everything just closes a bit, like the blood ways just close a bit more. And I also had some, my doula also gave me some shepherd's purse tincture. So it's a type of a plant tincture that helps with, I think, I don't know if it's with, yeah, with blood stopping, like, I don't know if it's like coagulating blood or exactly how it works. And but yeah, the bleeding was still quite intense, and then I opted for, they said, they don't want me to lose more blood, so they gave me a synthetic oxytocin shot, and I was happy with that, especially because Elsie was already out, and placenta was, I was still, I had actually had the placenta, the cord was cut actually much later. Only it was quite a long time before we cut the cord, And I yeah, I'm still unsure about the bleeding and how people generally go about with that, because when I did have the shot, it it stopped quite quickly after that. I could feel my uterus contracting more and more. And there's another shot that you can have that actually is a bit more like a harder drug in a sense, and that I could have had that if it didn't get better, but luckily it was fine by then. And yeah, and I think then it was really lovely because the midwives, they, really clear the place and they clean and they check in with you, and they would visit me the first day postpartum and fifth day and all of that. And we just, my husband and I and the doula, we ate a lovely stew, and then we went to bed, and it was really lovely. So
Beautiful.
that's the most of the day. Mm.
So can I ask you,
Yeah.
because in what you were sharing there, you were kind of asking a question about like what is a lot of blood
Yeah.
loss and all of that. So let's talk about it. So first I want to
Yeah.
know, did they tell you how much you lost? Do you know?
I can't remember exactly, but it was um I think is it 1,000? Is it like is it I think over a liter, I think. I'm not sure. Do you know what like this more or less the standard is? Because I think it's generally as I remember, isn't it like safer when it's like 800 or like under a liter or something like that? But because I think it was over that, I can't remember exactly what it was, to be honest. I think maybe it was like something over a liter, I think.
So a
Don't really.
postpartum hemorrhage is considered a postpartum hemorrhage after 500 mils.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
does that ring a bell? So maybe you were just over
Ma-
500 mils, if
Yeah,
not
maybe yes,
that.
yes. I think that it could have been like 800 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And my second question would be, were you symptomatic? Did you feel unwell?
Do you know what? That's an interesting question because I don't recall really feeling unwell. I was really tired, but I had also been in labor and like just had a baby. So if I look at like my doula was saying I looked quite pale. And one thing that they do is someone I know someone that says like if you can walk to your bed and back and don't pass out, then you're fine. But then again, that's not, if you've just given birth, it's not something you would immediately do, get up and walk so far. And
Well,
so
you walked over to your toilet, didn't you? So you walked. Did you feel
yes, that's
faint
true.
doing that?
No, no, I didn't. I think they could probably see that I'd lost, out of the experience of like the home births that they do, that it was more than average. But as you say, in terms of being symptomatic, don't I don't really specifically recall it, except being quite tired. But yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily necessary. Also didn't want to go, get up and go to the hospital now. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, obviously we don't know, because I wasn't there and you don't know. But I think it's a curious conversation because I do think that especially midwives within the NHS, especially publicly funded midwives, more so I would say than independent, tend to very much err on the side of caution, just like kind of the medicalized hospital system does. So they rather give you an injection to prevent something happening than not. And very many midwives will want to do what's called active third stage, which is giving the synthetic oxytocin. Because it feels safer. And if someone's coming up around 500 mils, which again, actually, that's not that much. As we are pregnant, we have a lot of extra blood volume. We're supposed to be able to handle blood loss. And of course, we don't want to have too much because, yes, too much when we're talking about over a liter and more can potentially influence the milk production, obviously, our recovery, and all of that for sure. But some women can lose that much and actually be asymptomatic and not affected by it at all. And some women can lose 200 mils and be faint and feel really like their heart is racing and they can't stand up after birth and they have to be in bed. So how you handle that is very individualized about, the midwife and obviously the woman, how knowledgeable she is and what she wants to do if case she bleeds. And for most women, they don't know because you're not a midwife. You don't have that awareness or knowledge if you haven't done that research and made yourself aware of that. So it sounds like to me that you weren't very symptomatic, but that you were kind of collecting a bit more than the 500 mils. Maybe you were somewhere between 500 and a liter, and just a precautionary thing. You were given kind of almost like prophylactically to stop bleeding and not continue to bleed the synthetic oxytocin. Now, in saying that, it's also interesting to know this fact, which is that if you had a physiological natural birth, you're actually at a higher risk of a major, so like a big hemorrhage. We're not talking about a small kind of normal hemorrhage of, if we can say that, but like a bigger one, a major one, maybe closer to 2 liters or more. If you are given synthetic oxytocin after birth. Isn't that curious? Okay, so again, it's like there's not a black and white answer. Was that a right or a wrong decision? No, I'm not
Yeah.
saying if it's right or wrong. I'm just having a discussion because I think it's curious and interesting, and I think women might think it's interesting to talk about. Because at the end of the day, the postpartum hour and hours after birth is the time, especially straight after birth, that midwives tend to be, or just care providers tend to be, most anxious and worried and scared of a bleed. That's one of the things that most midwives are afraid of, which when we are afraid of something, we tend to act quicker than we would otherwise. So it's just interesting to know that. Interesting to have these discussions with your midwife as you employ one and talk about how do you handle a bleed? When would you recommend synthetic oxytocin? Are you very quick onto that, or are you happy to wait and see? All of these things and variables matters. And at the end of the day, it sounds like you were happy to have that injection. You were happy with the outcome, and all was fine. Um, yeah, that's the most important, is that you're happy with the care you're given, and also that you know, of course, that there is options. And I think at the end of the day, also to check in with yourself about when you're being offered injection. For some who are listening, they're like, I don't care if I get an injection, like I don't care at all. And for some, they're like, I do care. And so if you do care, then ask yourself, am I symptomatic? Do I feel faint? Do I feel like my heart is racing and it's working hard? Am I feeling extremely, extremely tired? Am I feeling symptomatic, right? Because that's the symptoms. Um, Not just that it's looking with the eye like you're losing a bit more than kind of what we're now saying. You know, this is a hemorrhage. Mind you, a hemorrhage, if you're having a cesarean, that's a liter. So that's also curious. So you can't lose as much if you're doing a natural birth. And then it's like, why is that? It should be treated the same. You're not considered having a hemorrhage if you're losing less than a liter in a cesarean. So double standards, right? So I think these are interesting conversations to have.
Thank you, Anna. That's so beautiful. I'm so grateful for that because it's something I've, thought about a lot and have discussed it, but it's so good to have more knowledge on that. And I think, yeah, like as you say, thinking about the symptoms, I think that's something I can be with, and like to drop into that and be intuitive about that. Uh yeah, it's great. It's so fascinating. I learn so much every time I talk about it, or go through some of these things. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and there's so much to learn. There's so much to understand about the amazing process of birth. And you're always a student of birth and you continue to learn. And I'm the first to say that, I continue to learn as well through these stories, to listening to women, to attending births, and also to just continuing to read research and learn more about how we understand more about it. And actually, the more research that is being done, the more is pointing towards leave well alone and that physiology and nature knows best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's endless. I'm just enamored actually by our bodies, and this, and it's just how our bodies are also in sync with something bigger. It's this, yeah, it's really beautiful. And I'm so thank you so much for having this podcast, that's so that people can learn and just the variety of stories. I feel like honestly every story that I learn has been the most, or that I've listened to, by far that's been the most, you know, that was the best for me, one of the best, like in terms of knowledge, that was for me the best preparation. Because it's actually, I think as humans, we stories are something that like our brain works with stories, and to like kind of, I remember at the beginning, Nix told me as well. She was like, that was kind of a tip that she gave me. She would really like just like advise me to just listen to some and be with some of the stories and see how it can go, because that's something that it's almost like uh, unschooling situation where like we've obviously, as we know, like been like given it, or like we've been taught like that birth is this, hectic thing that on in movies or like stories of other people. But to listen to if you really listen to the stories that go well, and even not without hardship or anything, but to see how you can navigate that. Because I think back in the day when we were like proper in our villages, we were maybe a bit closer to that, so that's how you would grow up, like having natural births, and that was something that would happen and that you would know of without any funny things that come in the way of that. Of course, there would always, I'm sure, be things that would kind of in some way maybe sabotage it, um or make it harder than it needs to be. But I think we were a bit close. We were definitely closer to that, especially as women. So I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to like tap into a lot of that. And I just want everyone to know more and more about this. I think it's so important, and it's beautiful. It's the beginning of life. So it's just it's an honor to be part of it and to like speak about it. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love that there's so many women who choose to do the Sacred Birth Worker mentorship as a prep for their own pregnancy,
Mm.
conscious conception, birth, postpartum. Because yeah, I feel like we have lost so much of the kind of ancient woman's wisdom, and it's being reclaimed in different spaces like this one and different trainings. So thanks for that. So, if you had a first time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
um I would most definitely advise her to cultivate and get in touch with her own intuition. And like what is intuition? It's like the word, it's like the inward tutor. It's like a tuition of your inner self. And ways of doing that. It sometimes feels like a hard thing because it's not something that's always so practical in terms of it doesn't feel as like um like tangible. But I would say ways of working with that or being with that, for me has been to movement, like dancing throughout my pregnancy, and really really having time to connect with yourself, and um yeah, be with your body, because it's your body, it's you and your baby that's birthing this new life. It's no one else is birthing it for you, or delivering the baby. It's you who's going to do it. And I feel like this is such a beautiful also initiation for motherhood, because that's something you're going to do throughout motherhood as well. You're going to have to decide what is good for me and my baby, and or me and my child as we go forward. So yeah, I think finding ways to connect with your intuition, and because I feel like there's so much out there, like even the good things and the positive things that empower you, or that good knowledge or wisdom, um even if that gets like almost too much or overwhelming in terms of the volume of it, that even that can like take you away from just like being still with yourself. So finding that balance between having finding good knowledge, good sources of knowledge, or you know, not being naive, of course, to an extent, but then most of all, starting with the intuition. So I would say that more than as a starting point, more than anything. Yeah, and I think that would maybe look a bit different for every woman, but just yeah, to be with that as a guiding force for your birth, for your whole pregnancy and your birth, and then yeah, a way of also like enhancing that is also trying to surround yourself with people that do support that in you, that people and family that that can be with you in your vision of your birth. Because I think that, you know, if there are people that don't really align with the way that you feel about it, like for to have a natural birth, it might be a good time to not really engage with that too much, to not, it's not a time necessarily to try and always, you know, fight that, because I think birthing is a type of place where you want to, you know, surrender. And I think sometimes if you like fight to fight against something, then it can kind of take you out of that a calmer mode. So yeah, just like finding ways to connect inward and letting that be your guide. Yeah, I'd say that. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Güte, for coming on the podcast. It's been so lovely to hear your
Thank
birth
you.
story.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna.